Captain Garrett sat back in his chair and studied an unremarkable woman sitting serenely across from him. The office around them was a bit cluttered with piles of data disks sitting in piles. On the cheaply made desk, some crates stacked up in one corner and 3 pairs of boots lined up near the door. One wall held a large window overlooking what was casually being called a road. Dirt mostly since the mud from last cycle's rain had dried up. One lone transport vehicle moved past, while citizens walking or sharing gossip could be seen in the distance. He glanced down at the data pad in his hand and then back up at the woman. Her age was undeterminable, which was expected, as most people with access to Imperium grade medical care also, like himself, had probably had gene therapy to induce long, healthy life. In the year 2250, the average human's lifespan numbered in centuries, barring accidents or alien infections and unknown diseases. So, Miss Chen, Veta, yes? What brings you to Consolidated Freight? Employment. Garrett glanced at the datapad out of habit. He had already memorized what information was there on the crude application that Kara, his assistant, had concocted on the spot. Well, as you can see, we're just getting up and going. The colony was only established a few cycles ago, and our business has yet to really begun. I really don't have any open positions as of yet. Your application is vague on experience. What makes you believe that you have something to bring to Consolidated? Miss Chen gave a slight shrug. Shall we stop pretending that your real business is? I am skilled in several martial arts, well versed in both negotiations and interrogations, and a few other skills. Skills that your ministry will likely find advantageous. Spymaster Garrett's eyes narrowed slightly as he leaned back, a thin line creasing his lips. As head of the Squire's nascent intelligence service, he had taken pains to conceal both the fact and his activities from the public, such that it was. Yes, yet Miss Chen, fresh off the first cruise liner to stop in the system, had seen through the facade. The silence in the room stretched out for a moment, Garrett eyeing the shadow Sensi, Chen returning his gaze with a slightly amusing smile. Finally, the spymaster nodded. Okay, let's discuss our employment opportunities, Miss Chen. All right. So basically, what we're looking at is, as part of the crew that came down off of that disembarked from the cruise liner at the beginning of Cycle 10, there were a number of tech specialists, and these tech specialists are somewhat in a bridge gap between personalities and just general so they're general non-player characters, but they have additional skill sets and abilities and things that you can use and tap to enhance various ways of your game for your house to improve this, that, and the other thing. I'm kind of bambling around on this. So in this case, we're looking at what's called a shadow technician. When I rolled it up, she was a Tech 6 shadow Sensi. So the way this plays out, a shadow technician at level 3 is a specialist, level 4 is a senior specialist, level 5 is a master, and level 6 is a Sensi, otherwise a shadow Sensi. So we'll go and just break it down as to hair. While some agents go into the field, others choose to hone skills and become experts in their particular field. From these shadow techs, the House Spymaster gains masters of a given field. Some are chosen to join their fellow 007s in the field as members of shadow operations teams. Others become sensei or master teachers. Sensei choose one or more skills and master every aspect of them before teaching those skills to others. So in the case of a level 6, they have the ability to replace the needs for 2 level 5 techs, whatever they are assigned. So in theory, if I had 2 Tech 5 shadow masters that I were employing in the Ministry of Intelligence, I could then send them to other. With promoting her to oversee their position, she now can relieve them so they can go do other tasks. And so that's how that kind of plays out for that particular means. You also have is the master of 4 skill rolls, and I think she's at Tech 5 because I'm starting to think I've jumped up one on this. So let me take a minute to recheck my numbers here because I think 6 is a bit high. No, yeah, she's a Tech 5. I have a Tech 6 administration specialist, which it's another completely other It's the same venue, but a completely different thing. So she replaces the need for 2 level 4 techs wherever she's assigned. She is a master of 3 skills and may personally train up to 6 students in all 3 skills at the same time, unable to make use of SimPods for this dual training. Using SimPod training, Shadow Specialists may only teach 1 skill to a larger group. That's a different set of technology. We don't have it at the moment, so we're not going to fret about it. So in this case, we want to find out what Miss Chen is specialized in, and to do this, we're going to come over here to what's the skill chart. Now, I don't have a massive skill set list, in part because it just didn't come up, and I hadn't had time or need to expand upon it at the time, and other things had gotten in the way. So I don't know if that would ever change down the road. It's possible. So with the help of skilled instructors, it's possible for a house to improve the floobs and units through skills. Skills add bonus modifiers under certain conditions or situations. See training, technician, agents, and other floobs. First, determine if the NPC has skills by making yes, no, maybe. Well, we already know that because she is a tech specialist, she automatically has, and we know she has 3. And so, in order to get 3, she has to be of a green or a regular or veteran ranking, and I already applied the role earlier, but we'll go ahead and do it again anyway, just for fun. And so 26, so she wouldn't be able to qualify to get in that category. I need to get 83, so that would make her regular. So she has the equivalent of a regular, like regular troops, veteran troops, that kind of thing. She's a regular. She spent enough time that she's really pretty good at it. Being a regular gives her a plus 16 to any of her specific modifiers that might be applied for situations like if she's doing combat or search or something based off of her skills, or not based off her skills, just in general. So this gives her an improves her ability to successfully achieve things. We see that whenever you see me doing things for like Fred Dodge, for example, his modifier is is 0, I think. So he's at a big disadvantage because he's very low down on the table. In theory, I could tap her to do something like what Fred Dodge does, but she has much more value to me at this point as an instructor to teach lower technicians that I have available to raise them up in rank and abilities. So I can have her teach Fred Dodge her skills, as an example. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the chart and we're going to roll and see what kind she has. And I rolled a 56. So 56 is she has a survival skill. And within that, this is the only subchart the only skill that has a subchart, because it says what kind of environment she's a specialist in. So we roll again, and this is a 3. So 0G. So she has, i.e. vacuum. She has some survival skills in operating in a vacuum, which that's a valuable tool if you want to go down that road. We roll again, and 50. Now, I'm not going to have her give multiple survivals, which is possible. I mean, you can make the argument that she can, but I don't want to do that. So my next one would be explosives expert. So explosives. And then we're going to see what the last one is, a 15. And melee combat, which she already, stated that it's kind of a given that would be. So she has melee combat, which is martial art. And there's actually, there's somewhere in here where we talk about a few examples of, judo, taekwondo, karate, the Brazilian, whatever the heck it is, the Israeli, whatever the heck it is. But, and something you can just, whack-a-doodle style, whatever works for you. But the main issue is it gives her some distinct advantages when doing combat. It also opens up in the combat chapter. There are special moves and maneuvers that can be achieved through the knowledge of these martial arts that gives bonuses and stuff for doing things. In a way, they're kind of like combat feats, if you want to go into that particular genre. So in this case, we know she has these 3 skills. And for the house to benefit, one of the first things I need to do is I need to hire her, and of course she's come to me, so it's an automatic win. I know she's going to work. So the question then would be is what kind of standard of living do I want to give her? And we have a number of standards. We have poor quality, moderate, good, high, platinum, diamond, and imperium quality. And of course, the more you pay them, the higher in the expense they go. For the most part, most of my ministers and specialists would be in the high quality range because I also have to moderate a budget. So in high quality, for having a high quality status, standard of living is how one lives, dresses, and the appearance of wealth having its effects on how others react to and interact with a thingy. During negotiations, are placed out as modifiers meant to show one's status. A minister whose status is high quality is always going to be of less influential than a megacrat, but always still grants him status and advantages over those with lesser standard of living. Certain house-only builds, such as the Regional Administration Tower, increases standards of living by advancing them to platinum status, and some ministers to high quality, etc. When making a rule for standard of living, be sure to add the House Nobles modifier and the chance modifier below. So I can roll to see what she came with. So she came with 74 minus 50 would be 24. So she would have a moderate quality. This means she's actually not dirt poor. She's middle class, and she has a -5 to any negotiations, and she has a -25 when conducting things like searches, where she's trying to initiate other people to help her do things and stuff, which is something that's not necessarily good. Good quality is 0 modifiers on any across the board, and so we're going to give her high quality as a standard of living, and this will give her a +5 to negotiations and +5 to searches. And this only really applies if I use her in the field, or I use her to replace or to augment somebody like Fred Dodge. Now, just to be clear, for my own purposes, Fred Dodge is actually a planetary ranger, and he is employed by the Ministry of Culture and Labor, not the Ministry of Intelligence. So by rights, if I use her in the field, she would be what I call a 007. She would be a agent, a field agent. And since I'm choosing to set her up inside my ministry, I want to use her as a instructor to instruct my current agent crops. Then she's going to be what she is, a shadow Sensi. There's some trade-offs with this. Before I get to, let me finish the high quality. So, high quality is approaching the upper class on most worlds. High quality accommodations are often within Tech 2 residential builds with dining and better restaurants. Unfortunately, I don't have any Tech 2s just yet, but obviously if I did, she would then get moved up to that better housing scenario. Many can afford personal transports and clothing that give them confidence. Pay is standard at 0.51 credits to 1.5 credits per cycle. So I'm going to go on the low end because I'm working on a budget. So I'm going to give her 0.15 credits per cycle. And so the majority of Tech 2 through Tech 4 general techs fall into this category. Searches and attitude modifiers gain moderate bonuses. For house floobs or funky, such as sub-ministers, junior officers, personal assistants, and assorted positions, high quality adds a small staff, which she doesn't really need, blah, 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 blah. So there's opportunities and things there to expand on. What this means, though, is that I have to go to the my records for my Ministry of Intelligence, and at this current time, based on my world population of just slightly over 10,000, the staff in total at the Ministry of Intelligence is 22, with 5 of them already being earmarked to be 007s. One of them is the minister, and the minister has an assistant. So right off the bat, there's 7. And that leaves me with 15. And I wanted at least 2 special operations squads. So that squad, in my mind, is 5 individuals. So that would be 10 of those remaining 15. That leaves me 5 additional slots. Now, I'm going to obviously have to tap one of those for her. And because we're talking about setting up what's called a dojo, a school for her to teach her students at or in, even if it's just as mundane as an unused office in the Colonial Center somewhere. There's a back room that she's using for her quote office and training her dojo, and so this takes up not that it takes up any space and paperwork or anything, but in the accounting side of things, I have to account for the 0.51 credits that increases the budget for the ministry itself. And to in that aspect, there's we're back to that numbers crunching and counting. How much do you love the damn thing? Because you're going to have to do this, that, and the other thing to keep this stuff tracked. And I'm going to have to go and at some point get me some more of these folders because I want each ministry to have one. So I've got my Minister of Intelligence, his stats are already set up. And I wrote Vera Chin down here, and I will put this information on that one. That way I can keep track of her. And keep in mind that every cycle that progresses, everybody gets experience. You get a 0.01 point of experience just in everyday activity operations and things like this. So in her case, by training another person, she's gaining up an additional point, and that should accumulate because eventually she could progress. There is a ceiling. There's not an open-end progression forever. The ceiling is Tech 6. There is no Tech 7 and 8 positions as of yet. Generally what happens though, when you hit Tech 3 or 4, you can choose to subdivide, and so you can become a multi-specialist. In that case, then you would have she could become a Tech 2 administrator and a Tech 6 shadow Sensi. So then she would devote those extra experience points and stuff towards developing a second, a multi-class character-like scenario. So she can learn to pick up other skills that's not related to what she already has mastered, that can open and widen the areas that she takes, that she has, it makes good use of, or makes her better suited for what I need, blah, blah. I'm just babbling through the freaking thing. So I look through this section here, and I find the Ministry of Intelligence, and currently, beginning staff pool of 20 plus regional populations times 0.0002 equals X. So in this case, I get 2 for the little over 10,000 population and the initial 20. That gets me the 22 I'm talking about. And it takes basically rounded down the operational budget for the staff as of this point is 0.02. And then the Spymaster or Mister's salary or their standard of living, in this case I'm giving them 2.5, and then his Kara, his sub-minister, is 1.5, so now we have 4.02, and then I've opted to have a shadow budget. Now, a shadow budget is something where you stick away some funds for special operations for your Ministry of Intelligence to do. And I decided as part of my operating budget every cycle for the House to allot 5 credits. It would be 5 million Caesars if you want to go that route. Every 10 cycle or every cycle, so every 10 days, to this black budget. And since the black budget hasn't been tapped, it's currently accruing additional funds. Right now it's at 20 credits as of cycle 10, and so if they need to purchase information or bribe somebody, this is where they would tap that monetary need to come from. It also gives a limit. So at some point, if I don't tap it and it breaks 100, for example, and an opportunity comes along to, I don't know, purchase a damaged ship or something, or acquire something that would be suitable for the ministry, then the ministry actually has available funds to do that. That doesn't affect the budget of the cycle for the House. And that's just my opinion. This also allows for things like foreign field offices, or FFOs, which I have none, blinds, safe houses, and other support services, which technically I don't have any. Now, I'm a bit of an oddball or an odd egg when it comes to some of this stuff. So when I decided for my Ministry of Intelligence, I've always had this belief that this is like our modern version of the CIA and a number of other acronyms and stuff for the world, different world countries and things like this. For me, they obviously have official offices within the colonial ministry. You go into the main ministry buildings, the Colonial Center, which is where all the main ministry offices are located. They have their version of a floor with mundane offices. So the minister has his official office and attendant staff. But I've always felt that it's better for the intelligence ministry to have their actual activities be a little more clandestine. So I moved them off someplace else and set up a secondary operation, or actually their prime operation. So their facade or their public face is at the Colonial Center, but the actual operations and things are dealt with in another place. And so this is why I said, okay, consolidated freight sounds like a great cover. So I could have agents posing as people working for consolidated freight, etc., etc. And how the Shadow Sensi figured this out right away, it doesn't matter. We can speculate that perhaps once again, it's just intuition. It could be something more nefarious to that, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole unless some event comes up down the pike that makes me, well, hey, do I have a mole? And is this mole this person? And then we'll worry about that when we get to that point. So in this case, though, we also have shadow agents, which is how many squads or teams, or no, how many 007s. And I've allotted, well, actually I have 4 allotted, and I'm paying them the equivalent of 0.5 credits apiece, or no, 0.25 credits apiece. So they're getting a good quality standard living at this moment to save some credit. And then I have a shadow teams times 2, otherwise spec operation teams. In this case, I allotted 3. So I have 3 squads, 3 5-man teams of basically, I don't know, SWAT commandos, whatever you want to call them. They're there to give me some muscle for operations, potentially to back up my 007s, just like I'm doing with Culture Ministry. The Ministry of Culture, in the case of Fred Dodge, I have one of my House Lords watch commands, squads, kind of on loan detail to them as a backup if necessary. So as opposed to the militia, it was one of those squads that I sent with the drop shuttle for those Xeno scouts to go investigate the world, and the Xeno scouts stepped outside and died off. The team itself was still on the shuttle, had not declared it getting off at the same time, which was probably, I sent the canaries out, and I was grateful I did. In this case, so I had 1 extra slot. So I have that now as Miss Chin. And so down here under miscellaneous it says see notes. Cycle 10, I hired Shadow Sensi, Beta Chin, and established the ministry dojo at a standard living of 0.5 credits per cycle, which increased the budget for my ministry of intelligence, which then increases my operating budget for the house as a whole. And that's how I'm cracking that sort of thing. So what that allowed me to do is to go to my main control sheet, which in this case, I've been tapping my exchange sheet as well, because it's not a whole lot of extra stuff, but I added to the bottom of this another line. So Ministry Intelligence Dojo, Agents and Squads in Training. And currently it is cycle 10 with 5 cycles to go. And I have 1 agent, so 1 of my 007s and 1 of those 5-man squads, which totals a number of 6 people, are now in training with Miss Chen to gain her martial arts and explosive and survival in 0G knowledge. So when in the end of so in cycle 16, these 6 individuals will graduate, and then I will have a 007 who actually has some skills in melee combat and explosives. That'll be quite useful, and then survival in 0G. And at that point, then I will probably then decide if I'm going to add more people to them, and I could bring in people from my watch service over and use that Sensi to train them. So Chin can go across ministry boundaries. It doesn't matter who's employing her. Although traditionally I tend to look at a bigger picture, and I want her to continue training agents So all the agents I have available are going to have these skills, and if possible, the situation allows for it, warrants it, I actually want my minister and his assistant to take these training. So it's quite possible that Kara would be committed to 5 cycles of training, which means she would know, the assistant would need to borrow somebody to fill that role, and then at some point the minister goes into training. And for those 5 cycles, the minister is is in training and not available for operational control issues or whatever. So then I would use the sub-minister, or i.e. Kara, the minister's assistant, to fill in that role. So it's a matter of how I use my resources and things like that. So it's just like, so we got our standard of living established, and this goes into things like tech specialists. So tech specialty is what she falls under. So when I rolled her up, she is a shadow specialist, and this is what we got into that one where I talked about what that means. So if we look here for individual training, so we talk about individual training options. We have what's called impromptu dojos, which is just what I just did. I just assigned a room, said, here you go, use this room as your education, as your school, to teach whatever you can teach to these people. So a master specialist, also called a Sensi, sets up a classroom in a rented office or commercial space in the city, or in a slapdash or a cargo fab, and then this allows her to instruct up to 5 plus 1 per tech level above 4. So in the case of the tech 6, she's able to total is actual 7. Freelance instructors per events offer classes to anyone who can afford. So there's actually there's event roles where somebody will come and open a private dojo. And then it's open for anybody. That includes the house and the no and your platinums. Your platinums could then, I could decide to have my platinum just to, who wants a bodyguard that knows some stuff about martial arts, to attend a class by this person and get those skill sets. That, of course, is how much paperwork do you want to develop. It's a matter of your personal preference. Then we have what's called edu fabs, or education fabrications. Using an education prefab allows for the instructors to teach double-sized classes. This is at the expense of normal techs that the EDU fab would produce for a planet. A Tech 1 EDU fab would hold up to 10 instructors, each offering a skill or tech specialty based upon their own. So think about a portable school. Now, fabrications, in this case, fabs, are pre-manufactured structures that you set down, push the button, and they unfold and erect themselves. In the futuristic version, we actually have quite a few of these things in our modern era, where we're using air to inflate them, or structural supports. Think with the military putting up a forward operations base, they bring in all these structures. Back in the day, they've been Quonset huts and tents and things like this, but they can get quite elaborate. And so in the modern version, a la the Jetsons, air speeder folding up into a briefcase, is kind of that scenario. So the basic size and what it does. So a Tech 1 cargo fab, for example, is going to expand out into a mini warehouse capable of holding 100 tons of material, or items, or vehicles, or whatever. And when it's collapsed, it's going to fold down into something several meters across that's basically a cube or some other that pleasing whatever you want it to look like, and so it can be then picked up and loaded into a cargo bay as cargo and transported to another location, or into a ship, or into a vehicle, or onto a helo, or what have you. And then so as the tech level gets bigger, the fabs get bigger and more complex and more capable. So Tech 3 fabrications and higher actually are rated pretty much for any hostile environment. So if I could set one at the bottom of an ocean somewhere, or I could set them on an airless moon, and they have all the built-in life support systems required to support whoever's inside. And then in theory, they would be able to connect together and stuff. And that's a whole section. There's a whole chapter in the equipment, or in the equipment guide, that talks about that sort of stuff. So in the case of the Edo Fab dojos, if I can get my hands on one, then I can have 10 instructors with 5 students each. So in this case, I would be able to put her in this and still have room for 9 more instructors, but she would actually be able to double her production. So in her case, it says Tech 6 was able to do 7. I had it wrong because I had it 6. So she would be able to teach up to a class of 14 individuals per every 5 cycles. And then we have a militia training commands and other summer builds, and then SimPod training. SimPod training is just what it sounds like. You're going to have a simulation pod where you get into it that simulates the environment that you're going to be in. Think of a variation on the holodeck. And so you're going to be in, you're going to be plugged in, and physically speaking, in your mind, you're going to be in whatever environment or whatever, including being in a classroom environment, in order for you to be instructed by your instructor. And your instructor then is allowed to instruct up to 25 people at a time, as long as they all have access. So the instructor would be in a pod, and then you would have 25 more other pods for each person that's being in the pod. And this just means the instructor is able to do more, to cover more people in one go. The difference, though, is they don't get to add their personal modifiers. So it wouldn't be 25 plus 2, it would just be the 25. And then there's it talks about using a sim, creating sims, purchasing sims. This brings us into a different level of technology and operation, which at the initial house is nowhere near being in a position to utilize. But you're going to have encounters with people who can, as you progress up. At some point, you're going to find ways to acquire this technology and or benefit from it for your house as well. So this is when we get into cyberpunk kind of range of stuff, where we have implants stuck in our brains that allow us to do a lot of stuff. So currently the minister is using a data pad. Some point down the road, he might have a cranial input jack stuck in his head, where he basically then has access to the internet and a phone and his virtual computer right in front of his head. So his eyeballs are going to see a keyboard that nobody else will be able to see, and he'll be able to interact with that keyboard and do functions inside of his brain using these implants. Well, the next logical step in that is actually having sim chips, where you basically learn something on the fly and you don't gain permanent knowledge. So if I have a hand-to-hand combat sim, a SIM card, then I can just jack into my brain. I can then become a level 2 black belt and be pretty proficient in it, even though my physical body was not conditioned to be that. So there might be some side effects of doing things you're not really supposed to be doing because you're not conditioned physically to do. It's just like if you need to know how to fly a plane, for example, you could insert this thing, and now you have all the skills of an average pilot, and go from there. So there's advantages and disadvantages to all that technology, and the stuff's in here. So we talk about using the sims, creating sims, purchasing them, and so on and so forth. Excuse me. Anyway, so this goes into technicians, the worker pool, platinums and workers, workers versus techs, recruiting techs, the GMBN recruiting ad, tech specialists, which we've already covered. So this is what I'm talking about in that aspect of taking my various levels of individuals and finding creative uses for them. So when I look down my list of who stepped off of that cruise liner, and there'll become a time when so many of these people will be pouring down off those various ships coming in that I'll be saturated with them, and then I'll just be picky as to who I take advantage of, and the rest they just join the pool and find jobs, I guess. So my largest one is a Tech 6 administration specialist. And so this is an individual that really I'm going to have to set up and roll out and figure out exactly what I can benefit from. Ideally, this is going to help increase some production somewhere or revenue somewhere, or reduce the number of whatever. And then we have a communication specialist, Tech 5, that's in the same category as my Shadow Sensi. So my colony came with a system-wide communications network, or an SCN, and this is basically what it is. It is the communications hub, an HPG if you're a BattleTech fan, for the entire system of Fairwind. So everything within range, within the system itself, within a light year of the system, is wired in. We don't need hundreds of satellites and communication satellites. We don't need to have billions of miles of wire running or nothing. Everything can just, if you have a data pad, you have a comm unit, you can plug into this system-wide system, and I can enhance that system by plugging in these specialists. So I think I can boost it to 2 light years, which if that's true, then the next solar system over, if I have one of those solar systems I'm currently exploring and it has a planet that's habitable where I want to exploit, I can then set up a colony there, and they would have the benefit of being able to tap into the Fairwind communications network because they're so close. And in addition to that, I believe this boosts the amount of light years outward that they're able to communicate in beam traffic. So in theory, without going in and looking at the mechanics, I think it's 6. So anything within 6 light years of the Fairwind system, I can be in communication with via the HP net, my version of an HPG net, for communicating back and forth, sending messages, stuff like that. Beyond 6, it starts to become less reliable. So you can actually push the boundary. So you could probably go 10 light years, 12 light years, but your reliability is going to be, for good communications, is going to be much more of a challenge. It's like starships. Starships all have communication networks in them. They have their comm units. So in theory, I could assign this comm specialist to one of my scouts and then increase the scout's ability to communicate, which would allow my scout to actually range further out and still within calling range of help if they need to, and to benefit from that in other ways. So it's like this. So we go down the list. I have a Tech 4 administrator. Obviously, I'm going to find a ministry and plug that person in, or I'm going to find one of my factories that my platinums operate and plug it into that to increase production or reduce the cost or whatever the allowance for a Tech 4 does. And the weapons specialist. So once again, weapons specialists, think of an armor tech or a weapons tech. These are people that are specialized in manufacturing, maintaining, and repairing weapon grade material. And obviously one of the first things I might consider is putting either this weapon tech is going to my factory that produces weapons to increase the ability. So by adding this weapons tech specialist to my the factory that allows me to manufacture weapons, for example, this individual then means that if I can get the blueprints for a Tech 3 laser pistol or a Tech 4, whatever the Tech 4 is, I think it's either plasma or disruptor. Don't get me without going and looking it up. But then my factory, as long as I had the blueprints for it, would be able to produce those items. Without the blueprints, this Tech 4 specialist means if I acquire any tech weapons that are above Tech 1, I can then repair them. So I could also take this individual and plug it into my shipyard, for example. So when I get those damaged weapon components, including naval grade weapons that I've either found, salvaged myself, or purchased as a secondhand purchase, then I could utilize this individual skill set to make the repairs on them. All I'd have to do at this point is get the resources and the money and the time to fix that thing and bring it up to 100%. So we go down the list to Tech 3. So I have one scientist, an astrotech, an agritech, an industrial engineer, and another weapons tech. So these Tech 3 individuals, I'm likely obviously take that scientist. Now then I have an opportunity here. I can create a science field team, for example, out of my Ministry of Sciences and Culture and Education, Commerce and Labor, Science and Health. So I could take the scientists and make a team in my Ministry of Science and Health, and utilize them to, once I get some environmental suits created, to go to that swamp planet that killed my 2 rangers and investigate whatever it is that's there, get samples, and bring it back to the research facility. Or I could plug it into my research facility and get some bonuses there. I don't know that Tech 3 will do a whole lot, but there's obviously some advantages to it. The astrogation tech specialist, well, geez, that's a no-brainer. I want that person to be working on one of my ships. And they'll enhance the ship, give it some better speed, better range, better whatever it's going to do. And then, of course, agro would go to the agri concern. The industrial engineer obviously should go to one of my factories to help make them more efficient and or produce more. And then a Tech 3 weapons specialist. Once again, I could then take so in this case, I could take the Tech 4 weapons specialist, put him in my shipyard, and take the Tech 3 weapons specialist and put him into the factory that produces weapons. Or more likely, I will take the weapons specialist at Tech 4 and set up a dojo so they can be teaching general technicians their specialty, which would be weapon systems, and to expand my number of technicians with specialities kind of stuff. So that's how this stuff would play out. So I hope this wasn't totally boring for you and informative and useful. Anyway, till next time, this is Rick, and we will get on with our weekend, right? Going on, my friends, this is Rick, and hey, if you like the channel, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, tell your buddies, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell anybody else that's in the gaming industry or gaming fandom that says, hey, this is a channel worth checking out.